The wind howled across the high plains of Wyoming like a living thing, rattling the loose tin on the barn roof and driving needles of sleet against the windows of the old ranch house. Inside, Harlan Yates sat alone at the kitchen table, a single kerosene lamp throwing long shadows across the unpaid bills stacked beside his coffee cup. The bank had given him 30 days. 30 days to come up with money that simply wasn't there, or the double bar Y, 4 generations of Yates' blood and sweat, would belong to strangers. At 72, Harlan's hands shook when he lifted the cup. Arthritis, grief, exhaustion, he wasn't sure which was winning tonight. His wife, Clara, had died the winter before. His only son had been killed in Afghanistan a decade earlier. The cattle were thin, the hay was short, and the silence in the house pressed down heavier than any blizzard. That was when he heard the knock. It was soft, almost lost beneath the storm, but it came again, 3 timid taps. Harlan frowned, reached for the shotgun he kept by the door more out of habit than fear, and opened it. A little girl stood on the porch. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, barefoot in a threadbare nightgown, soaked to the bone and shivering so hard her teeth chattered loud enough to hear over the wind. Behind her, half hidden in the darkness, stood an even smaller child, maybe 4, clutching the older girl's leg and staring up at Harlan with huge, terrified eyes. The older girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Mister, can you take her instead of me?" Harlan's grip tightened on the doorframe. He had seen desperation before. Hell, he was living it, but never like this, never delivered by a child who looked like she'd already cried herself empty. "Instead of you," he repeated, the words rough as gravel. She nodded, pushing the smaller girl forward a step. "They're coming for me tomorrow. From the state. They said I'm too old for most families now, and there's no room for both of us in the new place. But Ellie, she's little. People want little ones. If you take her, maybe they'll let her stay somewhere safe. Please." The wind snatched her words and flung them across the yard. Harlan stared at the two of them, at the bruises blooming faint purple along the older girl's arms, at the way the little one, Ellie, buried her face in her sister's hip and whimpered. "What's your name, kid?" he asked. "Lily," she said. "Lily Rose Carter. We walked from the county home in town. It's 12 miles. I carried Ellie when she couldn't walk anymore. 12 miles. Through a January storm." Harlan felt something crack inside his chest, an old fault line he thought had sealed over years ago. He opened the door wider. "Come in before you freeze solid." They hesitated on the threshold like wild things deciding whether the trap was worth the warmth. Then Lily scooped Ellie up, Lord, she was strong for someone so small, and stepped inside. Harlan closed the door against the storm and turned to face them. Lily stood dripping on Clara's braided rug, clutching her sister like she expected someone to rip her away at any moment. "Sit," he said, gruff, pointing at the table. "Both of you." They obeyed. Ellie immediately crawled into Lily's lap and went still, the way frightened animals do when they finally reach cover. Harlan poured 2 mugs of coffee, remembered they were children, and dumped them out. He found a tin of cocoa Clara used to keep for grandkids who never came and mixed it with hot water and a splash of canned milk. The girls wrapped their blue fingers around the mugs like they were gold. Harlan sat across from them and waited. He had learned long ago that silence could pull truth out of people better than questions. Lily spoke first. "Our mama overdosed last March. Daddy's been gone since I was 6. There's no one else. The social worker, Miss Reynolds, she tries, but there's too many of us. They said I'm hard to place, because I mouth off when people try to split us up." Her chin lifted, defiant even through chattering teeth. "I won't let them split us up." Ellie lifted her head long enough to whisper, "Lily sings to me when the bad dreams come." Harlan's eyes burned. He cleared his throat. "You walked 12 miles to ask a stranger to adopt your sister and leave you behind." Lily met his gaze, steady as any adult he'd ever known. "I figured a rancher might need help. I'm strong. I can clean stalls, feed chickens, whatever. I don't eat much. Just keep Ellie. She's good. She don't cry hardly ever. She'll make you proud." Harlan looked at the stack of foreclosure papers, at the empty chairs around the table where his own family used to sit, at the 2 half-frozen children who had chosen his porch out of all the porches between here and town because they'd heard somewhere that Harlan Yates was a decent man. He stood up so fast the chair scraped loud across the floorboards. "You two stay right there." He disappeared down the hallway. Lily tensed, clutching Ellie tighter, ready to run. But Harlan came back with armfuls of blankets and 2 of Clara's old flannel nightgowns that still hung in the closet, smelling faintly of lavender and thyme. Bathrooms down the hall. Water's hot. Get cleaned up. Then you're sleeping in the guest room. We'll talk in the morning. Lily's eyes narrowed. You didn't say yes. I didn't say no, either, Harlan replied. Tonight, nobody's taking anybody anywhere. Storm's too bad. Even the state don't send people out in this. It was a lame excuse, and they both knew it. But Lily was too tired to argue. She carried Ellie to the bathroom, and Harlan heard the soft splash of water and Lily's murmured lullaby through the thin walls. He sat back down at the table and stared at the foreclosure notice until the words blurred. Morning came white and blinding, the world muffled under a foot of new snow. Harlan was up before dawn, same as always, frying bacon and cracking eggs into the skillet. The smell brought the girls out, hair damp and combed, wearing Clara's nightgowns like dresses on scarecrows. They ate in silence until Ellie, mouth ringed with egg yolk, looked up and asked, "Do you have cows?" "Some," Harlan said. "Can I see them?" Harlan glanced at Lily, who was watching him like a hawk watching a snare. "After chores," he said. They bundled up in coats 3 sizes too big, his old ones from the mudroom, and followed him out to the barn. The cold hit like a slap, but the girls didn't complain. Lily took the pitchfork from his hand without asking and started tossing hay into the mangers while Ellie trailed behind, scattering grain for the chickens with solemn concentration. Harlan watched them and felt the years peeling away. The barn smelled the same as it had when his own boy was small, hay and manure and warm animal breath. For the first time in months, the ache in his chest felt less like grief and more like memory. That afternoon, Miss Reynolds' county sedan fishtail up the driveway, chains clanking. She climbed out looking harried, cheeks wind-burned. "Mr. Yates, I cannot believe those girls walked here in that storm. I've got half the sheriff's department out looking." She stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, Lily on her knees helping Ellie button a tiny coat that had once belonged to Harlan's granddaughter, Harlan pouring coffee for the social worker like this was any ordinary morning. Miss Reynolds exhaled. "Lily, Ellie, come on, sweethearts. We've got a placement." Lily stepped in front of her sister. "No, it's not negotiable, Lily. You know the rules." Harlan set the coffee pot down with a deliberate clink. "Actually," he said, voice calm as creek ice, "I've decided to file for emergency kinship custody. The girls are distant cousins on my late wife's side." He slid a folder across the table, the family tree Clara had spent years tracing, complete with a third cousin twice removed whose married name had been Carter. It was thin, but it was something. "I'll be keeping them both until the hearing." Miss Reynolds opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Yates, the background checks, the home study. Can be done," Harlan said. "I've got a 4-bedroom house, no debt except the land note, and a lifetime of raising kids and cattle. You need a placement today. I'm offering one." The social worker looked at Lily, whose eyes had gone wide and suspiciously bright. She looked at Ellie, clinging to Harlan's leg now like a burr. She looked at the foreclosure notice Harlan had deliberately left on the table, the one that said everything about how much this old man had left to lose, and to give. Miss Reynolds sighed. "I'll be back tomorrow with the paperwork." She left without another word. Spring came late that year, but when it came fierce. The snow melted into the creeks, and the grass turned the color of hope. Harlan stood on the porch one May evening watching Lily, who now wore jeans that actually fit and boots broken in by her own feet, teach Ellie to ride old Daisy, the gentlest mare in the pasture. Ellie squealed with delight every time Daisy flicked an ear. The bank had granted a 6-month extension after Harlan sold the North 40 to a neighbor who'd always wanted it. It wasn't enough to save the whole ranch, but it bought time. Time for Lily to finish 5th grade at the school in town. Time for Ellie to start preschool and come home chattering about finger paints and new friends. Time for Harlan to remember what it felt like to laugh until his ribs hurt when Lily sassed him about leaving the gate open again. He never adopted them legally, too much red tape, too many questions about bloodlines that were more wish than truth, but nobody came looking anymore. The girls had a home, and Harlan had a reason to get up before dawn that had nothing to do with drowning. One night in late summer, fireflies blinking across the pastures like slow green lightning, Lily found him on the porch swing where he and Clara used to sit. She held out a crumpled piece of notebook paper. "I wrote this for school. The teacher said to write about someone who changed your life." Harlan took it with hands that no longer shook. The essay was titled, The Rancher Who Said Nothing. It told the story of a night in a blizzard, of a little girl who offered everything she had left to save her sister, and of an old man who didn't say yes, didn't say no, just opened the door a little wider and let the storm blow two small miracles into a house that had forgotten how to be a home. At the bottom, in careful 10-year-old cursive, Lily had added a postscript. He still hasn't said much. But every morning he makes cocoa with 2 marshmallows for Ellie and 1 for me because he says big kids don't need as much sweet. And every night he checks the locks twice and leaves the porch light on. I think that's how he says I love you. Harlan read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and slipped it into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. Lily sat down beside him on the swing. After a minute, she leaned her head against his arm, hesitant at first, then all at once, like trust finally winning over fear. Above them, the Wyoming sky burned with 1,000 years of stars, bright enough to guide any lost thing home. Harlan rested his weathered hand on Lily's hair and spoke the first gentle words he'd said to her. That weren't about chores or supper. I reckon, he said, voice rough with everything he'd never learned to say out loud, I reckon I could use 2 more hands around here permanent like. Lily looked up, eyes shining brighter than the stars. You mean it, she whispered. He thought of the little girl on his porch asking him to take her sister instead of her. He thought of the man he'd been that night, empty, angry, ready to let the bank and the grief bury him right along with his dreams. He looked at the strong, brave child beside him who had walked through a blizzard carrying hope in her arms. I mean it, he said. And somewhere in the darkness, the wind that had once howled like mourning now sounded almost like singing.